Catus Maximus here. This is the worst socket I've ever seen. Now, I've done a few tools, such as, I should say, a few worse tools, such as the worst adjustable wrench, worst box wrench, worst ratchet, and worst pliers. And so this kind of goes along with it. Although this is not a commercial product, this is a homemade 1 1/4 inch deep well socket. Just to give you an idea, it's, at least they kind of tried here. As we can see, it's made of 6061 aluminum, because it's a easier material to work with than any grade of steel. And from the looks of it, it may have been used on an impact. Obviously, it was not used very much. Aluminum socket will wear out super fast, and there's only two reasons I can think of. One, the person just didn't have the deep well and needed one so bad they had access to, you know, at least I think the minimum would be a drill press, but more likely a mill or a lathe or combination of both. Decide to make themselves a socket. So it's either they didn't have one, they needed one in a pinch, or, and maybe there was somebody who would only buy like Snap-on or Mac, in which case a 1/2 inch drive deep well socket would be a few bucks. You got to consider the amount of time you took just to make this aluminum one would have been just near the same price. Or they had a situation where they had some kind of special fastener that they were trying to not damage, and so they used a softer aluminum. Anyway, they didn't bother to knock the edges off, so it's really sharp. Not very good centering, and that's what makes me think it was more like a mill or a drill press, because if you would put this in a lathe, I mean, that looks like a big hole, but it's just so darn off center, and it would just you would have to have some real trouble with the tailstock on your lathe for the hole just to be that far off, unfortunately. Besides that, obviously no fluting. I guess I should mention, wherever well, I'll use this ratchet. They did make the 1/2 inch square fit real decently. It seems to work okay, holds pretty tight, proper depth. But other than that, that was the whole point of this video. As far as how somebody would have made this, besides drilling the hole as closely as possible, you can still see where since the hex was not machined quite perfectly, what they've done is they grabbed some kind of bit. It wouldn't have been exactly this shape, but once they did that, if you had a mill, then once you have the circle, you would have to calculate it out. The hex itself is actually surprisingly, the angles are proper and everything, so somebody did know what they're doing. And then you would have used some tool like this, I assume, maybe a one that's wide enough to actually go down and scrape the undercuts in order to actually make the hex. And the same deal with the 1/2 inch drive with the drive end there. And they would have gone down and probably just pulled and scraped a little bit, and that's what would have broke the burr, because we can see that there isn't any shavings built up in the bottom, kind of like old sockets are. It kind of looks like maybe from this side there is some built up shavings, but here it's pretty well cleaned out. Whenever they ran the tooling, they went in and they did clean out the corners. So anyway, that's the cheapest, and still the worst socket I've ever seen. Never seen somebody actually put in the effort to make an aluminum socket. You know, if you're going to put in the work, at least make it out of some kind of, you know, 1045 steel, something you at least get a little hardening and use out of. That's what makes me think it was like a specially kind of non-marring use. But then it ended up in a junk bin, so who knows. But did want to do a little video about it. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Till next time, Catus Maximus out.